Well, Sunshine, what we're going to do today, we're going to do just a little bit of tedding. We're using the old Farmall H. It's about a 41 model, I think. And a Krone Tedder. Now, Krone Tedder won't work on this tractor. It's got to have 2,000, 2,500 PSI of hydraulics to operate this tedder. It's got an accumulator on it. It had an accumulator on it, which required it to go over that much to get this tilt. Of course, we're kind of cheap here. We bought the tedder. It probably cost 12 times as much as this tractor cost. But there ain't any tedders around from 1940 that I could find. So, and I've had this for 10, 12 years. Point of it is, we modified it a little bit, got rid of the accumulator, put in an extra set of hydraulics, because these old Farmalls back in the day, a modern tractor's got pushing 3,000 PSI hydraulics. These H's, when they come out in the early models, were 500 PSI. That's not as much as a grease gun, or you about blow up balloon that tight. Then the later models had 750 pounds. Now, when they went to the Super H's, cost, of course, more than that. But what I'm getting at is, for this, a guy don't need to be putting hours on a $20,000 tractor, does he? Like my Kubota, it cost me $1 an hour in hydraulic fluid to run that. Meaning, every 600 hours, I got to change the hydraulic fluid, and it cost about $600 to do it. And that was before our current administration, and it may cost way more than that now. But suffice it to say, it cost me just $1 an hour in hydraulic fluid. It cost me $1 an hour in tires. About every 1,200 hours, that thing needs $1,200 worth of tires on it. So, you know, there's $2 an hour. Well, I can run this old tractor here. It's easier on fuel. I rebuilt the engine on it. We'll start that up and let her start purring. I'll get this folded down and we'll talk to you guys. Well, heck, let's just get it folded down right now while we're talking about the hydraulics and how much it don't have, because it don't have much. We'll see if this OH will start up. You guys have to listen to her purr. Oh, she's drifting you guys around a little bit. But, and she's not got, it don't have live hydraulics, meaning the clutch has to be out. You push in the clutch, hydraulics don't work. Let me set you guys up. I'll get on there a little bit. Now, I got a buddy, I'm not gonna say his name. Now, look at that rain cap. You just tell me you didn't want that rain cap moving around much when she was idling. She idles just slick as buttermilk, doesn't it? We'll put a little throttle to her. Same with the PTO on this. It don't work until you let out on the clutch. See, that's all tied together. If I mash on the brakes, it stops the PTO. It don't have live hydraulics, but we're going to get her to work it. And this hay's not very thick. We'll put the throttle to it. But I just want to take you guys around. This hay really ain't, I wouldn't say this hay's thick enough to need tedded if I had good drying weather. I don't. My low humidity's scheduled to be in the mid-50s. In order for equilibrium on hay, I want to bale, of course, below, I like to be below 18%. I'm put on my sunglasses, but I'm still looking at you. High speed, you know. Gotta keep the bugs out of my face. But your hay, it needs to be, to get it to store properly and to get it cured, you need to be at about 18% moisture content. Okay, well, the outside humidity, if it's above, and I'd have to look at a chart, I've got a chart for that. If you're over a certain amount of outside humidity, if your humidity is over, let's say 62%, your equilibrium on the hay at 18%, meaning I don't care if you let it sit outside in the blazing sun for 3 weeks in 62% humidity, your hay will never get below 18%. If your humidity gets, and you guys know how the closer something is to being the same, meaning that's equilibrium, it would take it forever to gain that last 0.5% or full percent from 19%, let's say to 18%, because it's already so close, right? It's not a big difference. Where if you use 100% humidity on hay, let's say, which you wouldn't be, but let's say you use a 60% humidity on hay, and it was 30% humidity outside, they're far enough apart, it's going to bring that hay down faster, right? The closer the outside humidity comes up, the slower it brings your hay down. And I'm dealing with hay, and that's common in my area, is to deal with humidity that is close to equilibrium. Now, that being said, just a half mile behind me, quarter mile behind me, is the Little Wabash River floodplain. Now it's only a little bit, it's 3/8 of a mile to the river right now and less than a quarter mile to where the water's at, okay? It's flooded, we're in flood right now. We finally got some rain, we were in a drought, and that's why this hay is so, what I want to say, I don't have a very good crop. I don't have very much tonnage out here, okay? I've been in drought, but I'm cutting what there is here because I need to. But what I'm getting at is, we finally got some rain, so we got wet ground. There's actually acres and acres, thousands of acres of water right over here, a quarter mile. And the sun's coming up, so I'm tedding this, trying to push it up, let the sun and this solar radiation dry this hay. The sun will help it some. I mowed it tight yesterday, and I'm going to ted it today. And what I'll probably do is stop you guys here for a minute, get you guys another, and try to get it where it'll bale tomorrow, which is a Saturday. I don't want to have to bale on Sunday. I will, I guess in certain circumstances, bail on a Sunday, but I never anticipate bailing on a Sunday. I ain't doing any mowing with the intention on having to bail it on a Sunday, if that makes sense. I don't ever cut with the anticipation on bailing on a Sunday. If it's going to make me bail on a Sunday, I'll either bail it or cut a day earlier or a day later, because I don't plan to do any work on a Sunday. Now, I may have to pull my ox out of a ditch on a Sunday, but I don't plan it that way. So we're going to take and ted this around. I'll get you guys a little bit better view, and you guys can see what's going on here. Guys, if you don't know, that's the old, believe it or not, that was the fuel tank for kerosene. When this tractor come out, you could run them on kerosene or gas. That hole just ahead of that was actually a gas tank. Now that only held, right about a gallon of gasoline. And what you did on these old tractors, they didn't call them kerosene, they called them distillate. You'd start this tractor up, get it warmed up, there's a gauge, of course it's not factory anymore, but there's your temperature gauge, and they used to have little louvers in front of the radiator. You could block the air off that radiator and get this engine warmed up hot. And when you did that, you switched it over and you started running kerosene right through your carburetor. Okay, you run them on kerosene, you started them on gas, switched them over to kerosene, or distillate they called it once they got hot, which is a whole lot more economical, a little bit less power, but you had to have the engine hot before it would run well on kerosene. And lo and behold, and this here being a 41 model, some of them come out hand crank. There was actually a crank you put in the front up there, and you turn the engine over by hand. Now these being kerosene and like a 1941 model, it tilt you guys down. Now these being where they could run on kerosene, like I say, this was in the 40s, early 40s, and they weren't too bad right then. That was before the war, see? And you could get them with rubber tires on them. Farmall H actually come out on steel or rubber. And electric start or just hand start. Now they all had hand start. You can start this tractor with a crank. Okay, you can turn this tractor over by hand and start it. Now the ones that didn't have electric start, they had a magneto on them and did not have a distributor. If they didn't have electric start, they didn't have a distributor because they didn't have a battery. So they didn't power the coil and condenser and whatnot. All right, now the ones with a magneto, they didn't have electric start, and a lot of them had steel wheels. And actually the later models or the mid models about wartime, the rubber tires were impossible to get. So a lot of these tractors come out on steel back tires and steel front tires. I know that's not right. Steel front and back though. And like I say, they run on distillate, but you did not want to kill that tractor. You did not want to lug it down and kill it while you were pulling on distillate, because let's say you was plowing and you hit a spot that just killed the tractor and you didn't clutch it in time and you killed it while you were on distillate. Well, you had to drain that carburetor and get gas run through it, and then hand crank that 4-cylinder 151 cubic inch engine until she hit on gasoline again. She was a bad deal. You didn't want, I ain't saying it was the end of the world. You know, back then that was just something you just knew you didn't want to do if you could keep from it. It wasn't the end of the world. You didn't have to call the mechanics in and have to rebuild your engine or reset the computer on them like you would now if you done something like that. But guys, that's first world problems right there, isn't it? But no, I've hand cranked, not this particular tractor. I've got a couple tractors up there, hand crank them and start them. I'm getting old and lazy. A lot of times I just pull them with another tractor and start them down. But it's kind of nice. You ain't got to worry about nothing else. I don't care if the batteries go dead on everything and Microsoft closes up shop. We're still going to run our equipment, ain't we? This old tractor, yeah, steering wheel's about beat off of it, but I probably put as many hours on this tractor a year as I put on my Kubota, loading and unloading hay with it. And it's more economical. Now I can sell the hay at the same price whether I put time on the Kubota or I put time on this H, sitting out in the sun, bouncing around in the seat, no live hydraulics. If I think about it, I'll show you here when I finish up the field. This tractor does not have enough hydraulics to fold this tedder. I actually have to pull this handle back. There's my hydraulics. That's the old handle off an old spotlight. Gives something to hold on to. Funny story on that. That same handle's been on 3 different tractors I've owned. It was on the first one I owned, and I just keep moving it around. I like it. That's how I picked my tractor out of a crowd at Walmart. It's got a spotlight handle on it. You ever steal my tractor, I can identify it. But no, I like working this old equipment. This old H is just sitting there running along. I can run it all day on about 15 gallons of fuel, which is far less than any other tractor I have. It's got big enough tires on it. It's got bigger tires than my Kubota, therefore it rides smoother. go down in a little hole or something and not be as problematic, not bounce my back so bad. Now, those that's curious will know I'm driving around out in the middle of the field right now, and I was going around from edge to edge. That's because when I get done cutting, I cut an X in the middle of this field. And I'm actually tedding it out right now so I can make my turns better. I'll put you guys a new place to sit, and I figure you guys out a new place to sit here and show you a little bit more what's going on. Show you this old tractor a little bit, this old tedder a little bit, talk to you some more a little bit. Now what we're doing, guys, this here hay was just mowed yesterday, and I know my fingers running around there back. This here hay was just mowed yesterday. And what I do is I got my hay bind set up where it's going in a pretty narrow swath. That way my tractor tires can run down this hay that's just been cut, but not have to run over the hay that's in a little bit of a windrow. And that does cause me to have to come back and ted this hay later on. Another nice thing about this H, Farmall H with a narrow front end, my back, you can see my back tires, they're running over the hay just a little bit. But my front tires, they're not hitting any hay, so they're not mashing that down in the ground anymore. And this old tractor's light. When I used to pull an H, I could get one of these down to about 3,200 pounds. I didn't have a bit of problem getting it to 32, or I'd pull it in 3,500 pound class with a couple of suitcase weights and my fat behind setting on it. So I guess I never did weigh it empty. Just a little over 3,000. I could have got it less than that. I'd fill the rear end with expanding foam and cut it out around the gears, so it only took about a gallon and a half of rear end oil to lubricate it all well. Down here where I put my feet, that's all cast iron. I had cut that off right in front of that shifter, or on my side of that shifter down there, and had that to where this back where I'm all set, and I built that out of aluminum. You can shave some weight off of it. Cut the bottom out of the gas tank. Still had the outside of it. Of course, that's part of your body. That's what the tractor looks like. You know, there's nothing covering the fuel tank. I cut the bottom plumb out of that to save another 10 or 15 pounds. Up there where the kerosene tank goes, I had about a 1 gallon plastic gas tank. We'll say out something like an old snapper ride lawnmower or something. Everything was about saving weight. Of course, didn't have the lights on there. And I had a wide front end, believe it or not, that weighed less than that narrow front end. I built that all from scratch. I built the radiator support and all that. And got rid of that big old heavy cast iron bolster up there and fabricated that all by hand. I had a wide front on it that was, it was a cobbled up mess. This shaft went up front in front of the radiator and actually had a piece of chain that run down and run a pitman arm. Oh, it was the most cobbled up mess you'd ever seen. But anyhow, so we're tedding these windrows out so they'll lay out flat like that. Slow Bob, the big orange ball. Old Bob, he can do his job today while I'm sitting in there sipping sarsaparillas and whatnot. Hopefully we can get this baled tomorrow. The hydraulic, or the PTO, there's the PTO lever. You probably can't see it. Now you guys seen that, how when I take off that starts spinning up. That's because these did not have live hydraulic or live PTO. And what that means to those of you that don't know, and I'm not trying to talk down, I'm just letting you know if you're just interested. Back in the day, like when this was made, they had not figured out how to drive the PTO independent of the gears in the transmission. Everything that was driven, the hydraulics and the PTO were after the clutch. Now on a modern tractor, they drive the hydraulics right off the engine. These weren't driven that way. These were driven off the gears in the transmission. And the same thing with hydraulics and the PTO were both driven off gears of the transmission. So therefore, if you pushed in the clutch, your PTO quit driving and so did your hydraulics. Now, that leads you to another unique set of problems. If you're, like you want to stop and lift up something at the end of the road, well, you can't do that on these tractors. You have to kick it into neutral, let the clutch back out, and then pick it up, and then push in the clutch, and go back about your business. Like a loader tractor on there, you can't, if you'd had a loader on this tractor, you couldn't lift the loader while the clutch was pushed in. You couldn't go up to something, push in the clutch, and just stop right there for a second and pick something up. You had to go up, kick it into neutral, let the clutch out, then you could pick it up, then you could go back on. Now, this PTO has a bunch of inertia, right? This equipment does. So, and that's hooked right to the gears of your transmission. Now, if you're running something like a bush hog that has a lot more inertia than this, if you're running a bush hog, you can push in the clutch and mash on the brakes, and it will still run you right off out through the brush because it's hooked to your gears. If you can't get it out of gear, it's hooked to your momentum. Yeah, you pushed in the clutch, all you did is detach the engine from the transmission, but the inertia of that bush hog will shove you right off through the brush down over the creek bank. I wouldn't say it's unsafe. Back then, heck, we didn't know any different. We just knew that. You knew if you seen yourself coming up on something, you didn't even push in the clutch or mash your brakes if you wanted to stop quick, because that put extra strain on your gears. That tightened everything up. You was better off just to reach up there and slip it out of gear. That's what you did if you wanted to stop quick. You slipped it out of gear and then pushed in on the clutch. And it was still spinning the gears, but that's okay. So, you guys can see kind of what's going on, I hope, with this Tedder. It's spreading this hay out in a nice blanket. I'm basically getting 100% coverage on my hayfield sun. I'm getting just as much sunlight on that hay as I can, meaning it's just as thin as I can get it. There's 100% coverage on this field. Another neat thing about a Tedder, I'm sure it's just a happy coincidence, but every once in a while you'll see that pickup of heavy slug of wet hay or something that's real wet, something that may have been down on the ground, not got any air to it. Well, it's denser, it's more dense. So when that throws it, it's sitting there, let's just say on average, this is throwing all the hay 7 foot behind it before it hits the ground. If it picks up a piece that's extra wet, it's got more density, therefore it will throw it farther, and it may throw it 20 foot. Well, what that does for us, that makes sure all the extra wet stuff is on top. It threw it farther than it threw everything else, so it threw it farther behind, so naturally it's going to land on top of everything else. I don't imagine when they was designing these Tedders, they decided, well, that's what we're going to do. No, I think it's just a happy coincidence, but it does help on a little bit of wet hay. It throws in slugs right up there on top. And you guys can see what I was talking about the live PTO that you don't know, and I hate to keep harping on it. A lot of people just don't know it. Here's where I kick into PTO, and that's way back at the back of the transmission. But I can push it. That doesn't start turning until I let out on the clutch and it stops. It's in, and I put it in gear, and now so while I'm taking off, that's got to spin that all up at once. It's got to get that spinning. You can see I push in the clutch, it slows down just like my tires did. They're all hooked with each other. But guys, that's what your inertia is going to do. And I know I've talked about inertia on chainsaw some, and how that's going to affect possibly our compression, or how inertia can maybe, I don't want to say this, how we can add inertia to, let's say, our flywheel, which I think is the easiest place to add it, and that might actually, we might be able to use that to mask a problem of higher compression. Higher compression is going to make the inertia work harder in that flywheel to bring that up on top dead center. If we can put more inertia on there, just like I said a while ago, if this thing was hooked to a bush hog, you can push in a clutch, and that tedder is pushing this tractor until it stops. And the same way on the way back down, see, and I got to put inertia back into that. Once the inertia is in there, you notice this tractor had to labor just a little bit to take off. That wasn't because it didn't want to move the tractor. That's because it was replacing inertia, okay? Same with the chainsaw. Every time it fires, it's putting inertia back into that flywheel. And it only has to replace as much as was taken out. So when I stop this tractor, that inertia just moved me from there to there. I've got to put that inertia back in right now. Think about that as top dead center, bottom dead center, or compression. Think about that as compression and the power. When it's coming up on power, when it's coming up on compression, it's taking inertia out of this system, slowing that piston down, just like when I pushed in the clutch, because it was working on its own. That inertia was doing the work, bringing that piston up top dead center. Now remember when I talked about if you had a bush hog hooked to this and spun up, you pushed in the clutch, it'll shove you from here to the end of the hayfield. Well, same thing with a high compression engine on a chainsaw. We start running real high compression or lowering the exhaust roof. And by lowering it, I mean we're at 102, 105, 110 degrees, let's say. We're building inertia. We're building compression we're using inertia out of that flywheel from the end of the power stroke to the end of the compression stroke when we're putting inertia back in, right? Anytime we're not putting it in, we're taking it out. So if we just make that flywheel heavier, like this tractor wants to slow down as soon as I push in the clutch, but this inertia carries me. If this was heavier, this thing would slow down at a slower rate. So, well, I guess, boy, I keep beating the dead horse, but I'm trying to explain it in a few different ways, guys. People think differently. So bear with me. What you might have understood on the first time, somebody else might understand on the third time. So bear with me. We got heavier inertia back here. I poke in the clutch on this, it'll run me through. Well, same way with the chainsaw. If you don't have enough inertia in your flywheel and you build up compression, you're going to gain some RPMs probably. But because you're able to put more inertia back in it. But you've got a loss on the back side of taking inertia out. And I think that's a lot of times why a lower exhaust roof will give, lower exhaust roof will give you lower RPMs because you're taking too much inertia out of that flywheel. You ain't overcoming it. It can't store enough inertia to get the speed, just like this tractor. Whenever I'm taking off with everything in, it's having to build inertia and everything else because there's not enough stored inertia there. So if we could store more inertia, and you can hear this old tractor ain't laboring. If you could see my old rain cap, it's not even opened up. It's just bouncing along. We don't have the governors open on this tractor. It's running at wide open throttle, but the butterfly ain't open that far. It's running at maximum RPMs, what the tractor's designed on, and it's not laboring any. So it's doing this work plus putting inertia in that tedder, and it don't care. It's happy with that. Well, if you go to put something heavier back here, it's got to keep putting inertia. Depends on how much inertia you put in. If you put something heavier back here, then it's really got to struggle to put the inertia into. But like a bush hog, if you're getting heavy grass, it's having to put the inertia in. It's having to cut that grass plus put the inertia back in all the time. Now, if you get that thing spun up out here where there's nothing sapping inertia from it, and you just to push in the clutch, that thing is just pushing you a long ways, right? Well, where I correlate that to chainsaws is knowing we only have to replace the amount of inertia we took out. I'm thinking a heavier flywheel would be good on chainsaw. Now it's going to make that labor coming up. It's not going to have that crack that you guys call out on the inner tube here. It ain't going to have that crack for lemon. But guys, I don't cut that kind of timber. I'm not worried about lemon. My limbs are mostly firewood. I don't have the evergreen trees that's got 1,000 limbs on them. So what everybody wants is different things. I don't mind if it takes me just an extra half a second for that chainsaw. I don't mind if it takes me an extra half a second for that chainsaw to come up to speed, because once it's up to speed, we're going to put her in the wood, and we're going to be in that wood for 30 seconds, cutting something, or even little stuff. So there's a lot of different kinds of saw builds because there's that many different kinds of sawyers, different kinds of lumber, different needs. That's not my need. So for my need, I'm thinking a heavier flywheel might be it. I'm thinking I can run a lower exhaust roof and maybe still be able to move that RPM range up. I'm thinking adding inertia to the flywheel can move my cut speed, my inertia, or I'm considering that running a heavy flywheel will let me move my cutting RPMs, my RPMs in the cut. For an arbitrary number, we can move that up 1,000 RPMs and still have a low exhaust roof and probably have far more torque because I'm harnessing power on the power stroke. I'm harnessing that burn just a little bit longer, right, before my exhaust roof opens. But conversely, I've got enough inertia to be able to close that exhaust earlier, and instead of compressing this much, compress this much. Make sense? There may be a bunch of problems with it, but just riding around out here in the hayfield thinking about it, it seems feasible. Now I pulled the flywheel off at 026, and I don't want to tear it up. This is something that'll be a ways down the road, guys, before I can prove this. I'll just let you know that right now. I'm just talking. That's what I like to do when I'm out here on the tractor, is sometimes I'll talk about farming, and sometimes we may move off and talk about chainsaws for a bit, just whatever's on my mind. But it'll probably be a little bit. I was really wanting to hog out the inside of that flywheel and weight that. I don't think I can on this 026. Well, I can. I shouldn't say I can't. I'm saying I'm not willing to sacrifice the flywheel on my next saw build, I figure I'll sacrifice that, no problem. If I gotta run a flywheel or two, I'll just get me a saw that's cheap enough. I'll buy 2 or 3 flywheels, and we'll test this theory. And I know we're regurgitating some stuff I've already talked about on the Inertia. But the reason I wanted to mention it on this tractor, and believe it or not, it just came to me, but the reason I wanted to mention it on this tractor is it don't have live PTO to it, right? So Inertia is something I can illustrate right here. So guys, I'm gonna finish this up. The video's probably getting plenty long. Hope you enjoyed the old tractor. So guys, think about that Inertia we got. Leave me a little comment down there if you think about it. Appreciate the comments. Everybody that's always jabbering with me. Appreciate it. If you guys want to see some more of this, that, the other, just hang around. Let me know what you'd like to see. All right, guys. The problem I was talking about why this tractor here will not run this here tedder, it will, is because of the hydraulics required on this one here. So I'm going to show you how I got it folded up. There's a cylinder there and a cylinder there that fold both these wings in. They're just little cylinders. And there's this little bitty cylinder right here, and that does this tilt. That's where the accumulator used to sit, was right here, and the tractor had to overcome that. I'm sure you guys can't see it. So all you really need to run this tedder with this tractor is a pair of vice grips. You just pull back the hydraulic lever and clamp it off. Rip that throttle wide open. It's trying. It's got the hydraulics pushed on it all it can, and I just got to sit there and lift them up. And you can see that's tilting back this way, so it's overcoming that. And then while that one's finishing lifting, once it's started, it'll about go. Once it's got enough mechanical advantage over it to where it's not lifting the whole thing, it'll about go. And then while that's finishing off, I just walk back around here and get ready to pull the vice grips off of her. And idle her back down and shut the valve on it because it won't hold. There you go. That's all it takes to be able to run one of these tedders with Farmall H.